coo. If you grew up anywhere in the United States with a window that opened in the morning, you've heard that sound, possibly thousands of times, possibly without ever really hearing it, and almost certainly, somewhere along the way, somebody told you it was sad. Today, I want to walk you through what's actually happening when that sound arrives at your window at 4:30 in the morning, and why the bird making it is doing something almost the exact opposite of mourning. The name is one of the most successful misreadings in American natural history. 200 years of people hearing the wrong thing in the same call. Once you hear it right, you can't unhear it. That's the whole video, in one sentence. The rest is just showing you how. Listen to the sound again. In your head, that opening note, the way the second syllable rises slightly before the rest of the call settles into a slow descent, coo, 5 to 7 notes, depending on the bird and the morning. Now imagine you've just stepped off a ship in 1620, or 1680, or 1720. You've never heard this bird before. The continent is unfamiliar. You're tired, often hungry, often grieving someone you left behind or buried recently. And at first light, from somewhere in a tree you can't quite locate, this sound arrives. It is, to a homesick European ear, shaped by funeral hymns and mourning rituals, a sound that fits a category they already had: lament, sorrow. The way a voice sounds when it doesn't have the energy to rise. They named the bird for what they thought they heard. The name stuck. Mourning dove, Zenita macrura, in the formal taxonomy, but in everyday American English, mourning, with a U. Other cultures, hearing similar sounding doves, didn't reach for the same word. In parts of the Mediterranean and the Middle East, where related dove species coo through similar dawns, the call has historically been associated with love poetry, with spring, with the announcement of a season rather than the closing of one. Same acoustic shape, different ear arriving at it. The sound itself didn't change. What changed is who was listening and what they were listening for. Here's the thing I want you to sit with for a second. The bird isn't mourning. The bird, when it makes this call, is doing something closer to advertising, closer to declaring, closer, in fact, to courtship and territory, and the loud daily work of being alive in spring. Now let's hear what's actually being said. There are several distinct mourning dove vocalizations, but the one you almost certainly know, the one this video is about, has a specific name in the ornithological literature: the perch coo, sometimes called the advertising coo. Cornell's All About Birds describes it in language anyone who's heard it once would recognize. 5 to 7 notes, opening with that signature inflected coo, then settling into 3 or 4 lower, drawn-out notes that fall and hold. It's almost always a male, almost always from an exposed perch, a wire, a high branch, a roof edge, and almost always, when you hear it well-formed and unhurried, it means one of 3 things at once. Listen for what the call is doing. The first function is territorial. The male, by repeating this sound from the same perch over several consecutive mornings, is saying something specific about real estate. This branch, this yard, this acoustic space. Mine. Other males in earshot, and there are almost always other males in earshot, register the broadcast and either answer from their own perches or decline to. The conversation is mostly about boundaries. The second function is pair bond reinforcement. If the male is already paired, the female is often nearby, sometimes sitting on eggs no more than 30 or 40 feet from his perch. The cooing maintains contact, the acoustic equivalent of a hand resting on a shoulder. Mirarchi and Baskett, whose 1994 monograph on the species is the closest thing the field has to a definitive reference, describe pair-bonded doves as maintaining what they call acoustic proximity through soft, frequent contact calling. The perch coo is the public version of that. The louder cousin, the third function, is recruitment. If the male isn't paired yet, the same call is also an invitation to unmated females in the area. Same notes, same rhythm, different audience, depending on who happens to be listening. A single call can be doing all 3 things simultaneously. That's part of what makes it interesting. Now, why done? Why so often before 5 in the morning, before most of the human noise has started? A few reasons converge. Cool. Still air at dawn carries low-frequency sound farther than warm, turbulent afternoon air. The acoustic range of a single male coo at 5 in the morning can stretch a quarter-mile or more in calm conditions. By noon, with traffic, lawn equipment, wind, and rising thermals, the same call might travel a fraction of that. Dawn is the broadcast window, when the signal is loudest for the lowest energy cost. There's also the matter of predation. Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks, the small accipiters that hunt doves, are mostly inactive in the first thin light of morning. The dove can sit exposed on a wire and call without immediately drawing the kind of attention that ends a bird's morning. By mid-morning, the same exposed perch becomes a different calculation entirely. So the dawn coo is the message broadcast during the safest, clearest window the day offers, which is exactly when you'd send the most important signals if you were a small bird with a lot to say. Listen for this part especially. The perch coo isn't the only sound a mourning dove makes. There's a shorter, softer call used near the nest, different rhythm, quieter, mostly between paired birds. There's a rare, sharper alarm call you may never hear in your life. And there's the wing whistle, which isn't a vocalization at all, but a mechanical sound made by air moving through specifically shaped feathers when the bird takes off fast. 4 different acoustic signatures from one species. Most people lump them all under one word and one mood. They are not the same. Here's where the listening starts to do real work. If you hear a dove cooing from the same perch, the same wire, the same branch, across 3 or 4 consecutive mornings, you are listening to a claimed territory. That perch is part of a working male's daily geography. There's a reasonable chance the nest, if there is one, is within a couple hundred feet of where he's calling from. I'm not going to suggest you go looking for it. Mourning dove nests are flimsy by design, and the birds are sensitive to disturbance. The distance you keep is part of what protects the bird you're starting to know, but the acoustic information is yours for free. From a porch, from a window, from a chair under a tree, count the calls in a single session, roughly. You don't need a precise number. What you're listening for is density. A male cooing intensively, many calls in a short window, returning quickly to the same perch, is in active breeding mode. A male cooing sparsely, irregularly, with long gaps, is probably outside peak season or between pairings. The rhythm tells you where in the breeding cycle you are. The direction matters too. A mourning dove almost always coos from a perch with a clear sightline. Once you've located the perch by ear, you've also, accidentally, found one of the highest, most exposed spots in your bird's territory. Pay attention to where the sound is coming from for a week, and you'll start to map perches you didn't know existed in trees you walk past every day. And then there's the part most people miss entirely. Listen. After a male's call, for a faint, slightly delayed coo, arriving from another direction, often softer, sometimes from surprisingly far away, that's a neighboring male, on his own perch, responding from his own claimed acoustic space. What you're hearing, in that exchange, is a boundary negotiation. 2 males, 2 territories, 2 perches, a shared edge between them somewhere in the air. The negotiation is mostly polite, mostly stable across weeks, but it's happening every morning, whether or not anyone is listening. This is the part I'd ask you to hold on to. The cooing is not background music. It is a working broadcast system. The males have something specific to communicate. The females have something specific to listen for. And the boundaries are real, even though you can't see them. You've been walking through this every spring of your life without noticing. So, what I'd suggest, if you've stayed with me this long, is small and concrete. For the next 3 mornings, before you check your phone, before you do anything else, spend 5 minutes listening from a window or a porch. Don't go looking. Don't try to spot the bird. Just hear it. Note 3 things. The time the first coo arrives, the direction it comes from. Whether you hear a second voice answering from another direction, that's it. You don't need a notebook. You can do it in your head. By the 3rd morning, something will have shifted. You'll start to hear 2 birds, then sometimes 3. You'll notice that the calling on Tuesday came from the same direction as the calling on Monday. which means the same perch, which means the same male. You'll begin, without meaning to assemble a map of a neighborhood you thought you already knew. Invisible to the eye. Audible, if you give it the attention. The strongest cooing season runs roughly from April through July across most of the country. Earlier in the south, sometimes well into August in mild regions. If you're starting in spring, you've picked a generous moment. The males are at their loudest and most consistent. The boundaries are being drawn and redrawn. You are arriving at the conversation while it's loudest. A note on language before I close. The name mourning dove isn't wrong. It's a real name, a beautiful name, and it's been the bird's name in American English for 2 centuries. I'm not asking you to stop using it. I'm asking you to stop letting the name tell you what you're hearing. The sound is older than the country it now lives in. It was here before the houses. It will, in some form, be here after. What it carries isn't grief. It's the loud, steady, deeply ordinary work of one of the most successful birds in North America, announcing itself to the morning. Tomorrow morning, somewhere near where you live, this sound is going to happen. It's going to happen whether or not you hear it. Don't sigh. Don't reach for the old word. Just listen for the second voice, answering from another tree. That's the conversation you've been missing.